Good morning, folks, and welcome to the Sabi Sands, to Djuma and Arathusa. We are here in South Africa, and an unusual setting for our chat this morning, but a very nice one at that. We are in a small kind of treehouse platform here, close to final control, and it is a beautiful place to be, and we thought we'd just try and mix it up as much as possible to, again, show you as much as we can out here, even if it is strange little things like this treehouse platform, and yesterday the setup behind final control. We're just trying to mix things up while the vehicles get fixed. Now, regarding vehicles, the temporary fix that we managed to do yesterday shows us that we know where the problem is, but yesterday sadly we didn't have the correct tools and or little bits and pieces to do a proper fix. So the job that we didn't last very long, sadly, but now we've come back from the main camp with all the tools that we require and all the little bits and pieces. So hopefully it shouldn't take VM and Mark too long to fix Wendy, or Zanele as she is also known. So that's the good news, but for now, the next hour or two we'll be up here in the treehouse platform. I've got a phone, so please make sure you ask me as many questions as possible on hashtag Safari Live and or questions at WildEarthTV, but I'd suggest the hashtag Safari Live because that is the thread that I am going to be reading this morning and checking up on any of your questions. So yes, we had a very nice trip back to camp last night. We saw 2 civet, which was good. We don't see too much on the way back. Well, we haven't. It's obviously it does change every trip, but we did see 2 civet last night, and the night before we actually got very lucky and had a brief glimpse of an aardvark, which is a very rare and elusive animal that only comes out after dark and usually quite late at night. But we managed to see one, the first one I've ever seen in this area of South Africa, and I did spend 3.5 years here a few years back, so to see my first aardvark here was great. And yeah, that was 2 nights ago. Last night on the way back we saw 2 civet, which was good, and on the way in this morning, not too much to report. We always drive the access road into camp quite slowly. It's about 2 miles long from where we get into the reserve, the road that leads us down to Djuma, and we typically drive that road fairly slowly so that we can check for tracks, but no sign of anyone too important walking down Vuyatela access, the main road that leads us in. Did you see what that was that flew over? Some birds just flew over, and it sounded like small fighter planes shooting past. They were moving very quickly. We could just hear a rush of wind pass over, but neither Jason, who was on camera this morning, or myself managed to see what they were. Alex is on control this morning. He's back from a short break that he took, which is great to have him back. And like I said, VM and Mark are currently probably underneath the Land Rover, which is an interesting place excuse me, to find yourself at this hour of the morning. But the fact that we took the fuel tank out yesterday and established what needs to be done should mean, in theory, that because we've had a practice run the second time we do it with the right equipment and the right little parts to change out, hopefully it won't take the guys so long. So I don't appear to be getting any questions, but that could well be me or the network. We've got another special guest here today, Twin Spot. We were graced with his presence yesterday, and I'm not sure exactly what he's looking at down there below us, but he is fairly curious with something down there, unless he's just enjoying the view as we are. Bruno is the bigger dog that you may have seen yesterday. Was around, but I don't think he's nimble enough to get up the staircase to the treehouse, so we're not too sure where he is at the moment. Now it appears that we're having a small issue with signal here, but We'll give it a moment or two. If not, I will hand this device back to Jason, as it belongs to him, and he may know how to work it better than I do. So let me just do that now. Thank you, Jason. It really is a beautiful morning. It's overcast, fully covered with clouds, but that could burn off later. There's a thin little strip on the eastern horizon that provided us with a beautiful, beautiful sunrise. It was bright pink as we left Manyeleti this morning, the camp where we stay. And right now we can just kind of see a bit of a yellow tinge on the horizon, and I do think it will clear out, hopefully, as the day goes on. If not, we are happy with overcast weather, provided it doesn't rain. It does cool things down a lot and allows us to typically enjoy slightly better game viewing. I mean, that's not a guarantee that if it's overcast the animals will be performing, but it certainly does help. Sorry, I've just seen, looks like there's two Cape turtle doves feeding on a little white berry bush, and I just saw one wing flapping into the air slightly out of control, so I thought it may have got itself into spots of bother, potentially a snake. Thank you, sir. Okay, so Jason has made a plan here, and it appears that we will now be getting the tweets sent through via a different platform or a different app of sorts. And so thank you for asking questions if you have been asking questions, and just give us a moment or two to sort out the small technical glitch here. There was internet connection here earlier, but for some reason we're not picking it up anymore, so our initial plan to receive the tweets has failed. Stores at airports around the world that I've seen, if not maybe a boutique bottle store or liquor store may have them. Anyway, amarula is the liqueur made from the marula tree, not the amarula tree, and they are beginning to fruit at the moment. This looks to be like a male marula, and therefore he is not bearing any fruits. But the females will be bearing fruits now, and they are starting to drop them slowly. So as they ripen over the next few weeks and begin to drop, we can look forward to a lot of good entertainment from elephants feeding on them. A wide variety of animals feed on them. They're very high in vitamin C and a sought after delicacy out here by the animals and also the humans. They are delicious for us to eat, and you can make a local brew out of them, a beer essentially. You can ferment them, and I'm sure a marmalade would be good. I've been speaking about this marmalade for a while, so I am going to be pressured to make a marula marmalade or marula jam this year, which I look forward to. Another thing that's significant about this tree and this area of the world that we find ourselves in is that leopards love to sleep in them, and you can understand why. Being up in the canopy here, you can notice a lot of very horizontal and also thick branches. Now these thick horizontal branches are perfect places for leopards to relax during the day if it's very hot. If not that, to carry up impala or other antelope that they may have caught and killed, or any prey item actually, and wedge them in the forks of these trees, and that way keep them away from hyena, make it difficult for lion to steal them. Lions not being nearly as good as a climber as a leopard. So if you are to be lucky enough to see a leopard up a tree whilst on safari with us, the strong likelihood is that it will be lying in a marula tree. So that's another reason why I personally like them. They are the most comfortable and likely tree to find a leopard sleeping in. To distinguish them out in the field, now it's difficult because there are so many different kinds of trees. But what we'll do is we'll try and show you two different trees, and that way give you an idea of two simple differences to look for when establishing which tree you may be looking at. So now, if you look at the main or any section of this tree with the bark, it's fair to say that it's segmented or almost puzzle piece, individual blocks, and often mottled in color, so varying in color, grays, lighter grays, dark browns. So an individually kind of puzzle pieced bark system with a variety of different colors as you look across the tree. Now, that is one way to establish that it is a marula, puzzle piece bark. Now, another thing that I'll get Jason, aka Romeo, to show you is at the terminal end of any branch. So this branch that's hanging down right below us there, yeah, that's perfect. As Jason zooms in, what you will notice is that it's not the best time of year to be doing it, but I'm going to give it a bash anyway, is on these little terminal branches that you can see right at the end of the tree, they finish very thick. They don't taper off into thin twigs like most trees do. They've got almost fat finger-like terminal ends to their branches, and during winter this is very easy to see when there's no leaves on the tree, which there are now in summer. So the thick terminal ends to the branches is another thing that you can look at. Excuse me. Now, while we are pointed in this direction, we'll point at the silver cluster leaf, which is directly behind it, and if you can just try and zoom in as much as you can to it there, Jason, and onto the bark section. What you'll notice is that this bark of this tree is, and it's a little bit more difficult from here, but here we can see a little bit better. Other than the moss or lichens that you can see growing on the horizontal branches, it's a very ridged bark. It's not individual puzzle pieces. So that's one way of distinguishing differences between trees, is just looking at their bark alone, let alone their leaves or their shape or their size. Just their bark is a good indicating factor a lot of the time to establish what kind of a tree you're looking at. This is a beautiful big silver cluster leaf that we are looking at, and as Jason pans out or zooms out, you'll notice it's a beautiful colored tree, and hence the name silver cluster leaf. It does have a very silvery tinge to their leaves. This is a monster for this area, and probably the reason for that is that it is within a fenced off garden, so this is to prevent the elephants from coming in and destroying any gardening work that may have been done here. And this allows trees like the silver cluster leaf to get massive. Usually they don't make it that big out here. Now, in all of this time, I have not looked at the cell phone for any updates, but here we go. We've got a question from Janice on Twitter. Good morning, Janice. How are you? Janice's question is, can you explain the name of the quarantine area? And I can. I do need to do a little bit more research, as I potentially don't know the full story. But what I do know is that the Sabi Sands many years ago, 50, 60 years ago, or probably even longer back than that, was used as an area for people to come hunting, and people also try to do mixed farming between livestock as well as wild animals. So they would try and farm beef and graze beef in this area amongst the wild animals. Then in the mid-60s, this reserve was decided was stopped all farming and hunting, and some game was reintroduced into the area. And during that time of reintroducing game, they would bring animals from different areas, and they would need to be in quarantine in an area where they can acclimatize to their new environment. And that was this quarantine clearing, this beautiful big clearing. They would have had big structures, or bomas as we would refer to them, that would enclose the animals and allow them to... There's some red-billed buffalo weavers that keep flying past with nesting material. They're nesting up in one of the masts not too far from here, one of the signal towers that we have. So Janice, yes, the reason for it being called quarantine area is mainly for animals that were coming into the reserve, being reintroduced many years ago, were here on a short-term basis in a semi-quarantine environment. So that's as far as I know. I do know Mark mentioned that Inyala were one of the animals that were reintroduced to the area, but there could certainly be more that were reintroduced. I'm not entirely sure of that though. Excuse me. Now, Melanie on Twitter, what snakes do you get in South Africa? Whew, that is an open-ended question because we get very, very many snakes in South Africa. Snakes that are more common and as a family name would be pythons, the adders. Adders are kind of similar to rattlesnakes in their appearance and their anatomy. So a lot of adders. Some of the more renowned snakes are black mambas and green mambas. Those are probably two of the better known snakes from Southern Africa. They are both highly venomous. We do get the black mamba in this area, and we've actually been lucky to have a few sightings of them. Often brief glimpses. The best sighting I actually had probably was last week sometime. I was just doing a short run around the perimeter of the fence at Manyeleti, the camp where we stay, and it was interesting because about 2 minutes or 3 minutes before I did bump into a black mamba running around the camp, I did think to myself, what would happen if I saw a snake in this certain area, because I was running through an area where it was a little bit grassy, so hard to see far ahead of you. So obviously if you run into a situation or get into a dangerous situation quickly, the animal on the other end that may feel threatened is going to be more likely to attack or try and defend itself. So you try and avoid moving quickly when you can in the bush where there are dangerous animals. Anyway, when you're running, that becomes difficult. So about 2 minutes before, I thought, oh, what happens if I see a snake? Just, you know, kind of mentally preparing myself to spring over it or whatever needs to be done. And like I say, 2 minutes later, couldn't believe it, there was a black mamba, thankfully in an area that was quite open and clear ahead of me. So I saw it about 10 meters ahead of me, and surprisingly it didn't actually see me, which I found interesting. I thought it would have detected me because I was running in quite quickly, but it didn't see me and just continued to slither through the grass, sniffing from side to side. And with snakes, how their sense of smell works, which is a sense that they use greatly to find prey or get close to prey. Their tongue is forked, and essentially, as most of us do know, the forked tongue of a snake, and as they put them out into the air and wiggle them about, each receptor at the end of each kind of fork will pick up scent differently, because obviously they're slightly distant, they're slightly separated. So if a scent is coming stronger from the left-hand fork, it'll indicate to the snake to head to the left or to the right. So that is the reason why they have that fork. It does allow them to kind of pinpoint more accurately where scent is coming from. And when they put their tongue back into their mouth, there's almost kind of a garage, you could call it, for each fork of the tongue, and those receptors get fed into the little garages where the information gets processed, and that tells the snake where it's at. So I just saw it sniffing through the grass, slithering from side to side, and managed to get about 5 meters away from it, and it was completely unperturbed by my presence and unaggressive, as they sometimes have been portrayed to be, aggressive snakes that will chase people down. That is highly unlikely, and I don't think true. But this again is in my personal experience with these snakes. It does all depend on individual experiences. So from up here, or from where I'm standing, not so much from where the camera is positioned, so it'll be difficult for you to see. But if we do see anything walking through the quarantine clearings, we'll be sure to try and move the camera and show you guys. But I've just seen a small movement, which was just a bush, so not really a movement, more of a shape, out in the clearings that I thought I needed to double check with my binoculars. Okay, let's check and see if we've got any more questions. No. Okay, Jason's just going to wipe the lens quickly, folks. Bear with us.
Very good.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you. Now, Jason, I'm not sure what the problem could be, but... Oh, here it comes. Alex is typing us a new message. Okay. Alex is either typing a very long question or he's a slow typer. We will find out the answer to this shortly.
I have a question.
Okay.
How many different scorpions have you been stung by?
How many different scorpions have I been stung by? Thank you, that is a good question, Jason. I think it's 3 different species. The Epistocanthus, both Asper and Leatherpiece. Sorry, scorpions only really have Latin names, so I'm not doing it to sound impressive. I prefer to use common names because they're usually a lot more easy to remember and a lot more applicable to us as normal folk just wanting to look at pretty animals. So the scorpions, and other than the hairy thick-tailed scorpion of southern Africa, which is the most venomous, all of the rest are only known by their Latin names. So there are two different Epistocanthus species that I've been stung by, and they are far less than a bee sting. They're very relaxed scorpions a lot of the time that you can pick up and handle, and they generally don't bother you, but occasionally they do let off a little sting. So those are the 2 different species that I've been stung mostly by. And then there's another one that we hopefully will be able to show you. It's coming out quite a lot at this time of the year. They head out onto the roads in search of mates or new den sites. The specific species is called an Epistothalmus glabifrons, and this scorpion has got very big lobster-like pincers and also quite a big tail. It's a robust, fairly large scorpion, and it's fiercer than it appears, and it conducts itself in quite a fierce way. It can stridulate, so by rubbing its body segments together it can make a kind of a hissing noise that is fairly disconcerting, and they jump from side to side flicking their tail. I guess you could almost describe them as ninjas, the way they can control their tail. It's incredible how they can maneuver it from side to side, and they jump around. And hopefully we will be able to show all of you this one evening when they do come out onto the roads. But once the third time I had been stung by the 3rd different species was by this Epistothalmus, and it was for research purposes. At a camp where I used to work, the scorpion experts of southern Africa, who's written the book of scorpions of South Africa, used to come and train us and explore with us and teach us all about scorpions, which was a great privilege to spend time with him. He's a wonderful man, Jonathan Leeming. And sorry, I just heard a little voice down there. It was a lady calling Twin Spot for breakfast. So Twin Spot has left us for brekkie. So the time I got stung then was self-induced. I got stung on purpose. I just put my hand down on its pincers, not hard, and then it stung me, and I gave it a rating, a pain rating for Jonathan, so that he can put in his book, if you do get stung by a certain scorpion, he's got different kind of gauges out of 10 as to what kind of pain you may experience. So these are the strange things we find ourselves doing out here, occasionally from time to time. So yeah, scorpions, a few stings, but thankfully nothing serious. The hairy thick-tailed scorpion, which you do get here, not too many in this specific area, but not many miles from here you do get them more prolifically. The hairy thick-tailed scorpion is a terror to be stung by. You'll probably end up in hospital depending on how much venom they manage to get into you. A friend of mine who got stung 3 times on the foot at night, he was wearing slip-slops, which wasn't a good move, as a starting point. But when he got stung, he said by the time the venom had made it to his waist, that was breaking points, when he bit onto a wooden spoon and started crying. And then it was misery until he got onto, I'm fairly sure he did get onto morphine or some other very strong painkiller that kind of comatosed him, and the recovery was fairly quick, but he did still feel a bit shaky on his feet a week after the scorpion had stung him. So you do get some nasty ones out here. Thankfully they don't sting us too often, although Mark did get stung by one just the other day. And while we're on the topic of scorpions, it's important to discuss them because they do occur very widely throughout this ecosystem that we find ourselves in, and places where you could find them, now depending on the species, they've all kind of inhabited slightly different niches. I wouldn't be hugely surprised that if there were one or two scorpions in this tree, in a very specific place in the cracks between the dead bark and the trunk, so this would be a good place. And you do get trees like knobthorn acacias that do have a lot more ridges in their bark, or hiding places for scorpions to live in them. So these hiding places in trees do form home to certain species. You get others that like to live on rocky outcrops, on rocks, on top of rocks. All scorpions require a crevice to live in, hence their flat bodies, flat pincers. They can fit safely into these little crevices, and that way wait a lot of the time in ambush for their prey, so they don't go out hunting typically. The only time they generally leave their burrows or crevices is to find mates. So you do find them in trees, on the ground, in burrows, straight down into sandy soil that looked simply like coin slots. That's another little niche that they've inhabited. So they are found all over the show, and a good way of seeing them is with a UV torch or a black light. I hadn't heard about this until I started working in the industry, and with a black light or a UV light you can shine around at night and they literally will glow in the dark like small glow in the dark toys. And that is another thing we will be able to show you hopefully in the coming months. Okay, Kim on Twitter, what is your favorite South African dish? Now, that's not an easy one. There's so many different great cuisines in South Africa, and that's got a lot to do with our history and the fact that we've got a lot of different cultural influences in South Africa, a lot of Indian influence from the spice routes and people that came to work in South Africa from India many years ago. So there's a lot of great Indian cuisine in South Africa, and there's a lot of great African cuisine, obviously from all the African people that have grown up here and lived here for forever, and then kind of a bit of European and Western influence from settlers that arrived. So from all the different people that have ended up in this same beautiful country, we do have a mixture of different flavors and great cuisines. But I think something that all South Africans would call or miss more than anything else being away from home is a good old-fashioned braai. Now, a braai, B-R-A-A-I, is the South African, or actually Afrikaans terminology or Dutch terminology used for a barbecue. And this word braai, despite it being of Dutch heritage, Afrikaans in language, which is a South African language, it's a universal term known by almost every South African. It doesn't matter what language you speak, a braai is universal in South Africa and is well known. And it's important that it's not a gas braai. It needs to be coal or wood fired to get that smoky flavor. So gas braais would be considered taking a shortcut when having a braai. And obviously it's important what you put onto the braai in terms of the meats that you could be eating, and there's a very wide variety of different meats. Obviously game meats or wild venison can be very good on the barbecue, or just good old steaks and drumsticks, something we call sasatis or kebabs, skewers, a sausage, a form of beef sausage called boerewors, which directly translates to farmer sausage, is one of the signature meats to have on a barbecue, but it's up to you what you cook on the barbecue. As long as you do it properly, people will be happy, but it could be anything: fish, chicken, any meat, you name it. And then something that could be accompanied with the braai, which is also sticking to the South African theme, is something called pap, which is a refined maize meal that you cook into. It's starch, and it's white in color, and it cooks into almost a spongy loaf, quite a thick spongy loaf called pap, and that's a local dish of the African people that is eaten very widely throughout South Africa and Africa as a whole. Pap, you could say, is the main fuel source for Africa, or most of the southern African countries, I can say for certain. So that's another signature side dish that would be accompanied as a starch for the barbecue. I personally love a mushroom sauce to drizzle over anything. So if I could choose one more meal to have, my favorite dish, it's not a specific dish, it's more of an event, and that would be a braai. And I think most South Africans would agree with me. If you are watching from abroad, that smell you get when your neighbor's braaiing, or you can smell a braai, always makes you jealous, and it's a smell that you long for when you are out of the country. So that is one of my favorite dishes, but there are many. I do love cooking and fine dining. So thanks, Kim, good question. You should come and have a braai one day. Another term for braai in Shangaan or Zulu, a few of the local languages, is shisanyama, which means literally to burn the meat. So that's a nice word as well, to know shisanyama. Okay, Kenneth on email: have you ever been bitten by a snake? Yes, I have. The first time I got bitten by a snake, I was probably 8 years old, 8 or 9 years old, and we were in an area called Underberg. It's a beautiful farming area in the countryside, inland, about midway up the east coast of South Africa, and a few, about 100 miles inland, just over that. And it actually forms part of the Drakensberg mountain range, which continues all the way to where we are here in the northeast of the country. And I was there on a fishing trip with a good friend of mine. His father was a great trout fisherman, and he would take us fly fishing these beautiful big lakes in Underberg. And we were on a fishing trip and managed to catch 2 small grass snakes, which are harmless snakes. And thankfully this friend of mine's father was very knowledgeable in the bush, and he told us, no, it's fine, we could catch them and keep them for a few days as pets. So myself and my good friend Dave, who does sometimes watch the show, so Dave, if you're watching, good morning. Dave and I were playing with our new snakes, our new best friends, in the garden, and my snake kind of just slithered off quite quickly, and I ran after it because I didn't want to lose it. And as I chased it, it obviously slithered faster and was like, I'm getting the hell out of here. And eventually I caught up to it and grabbed it on the tail, and understandably it turned around immediately and bit me on the hand, because it wanted to go and I was stopping it from going. So it bit me on the hand once, which induced shock and a bit of panic, but the problem was that it was continuing to slither away, which means it was still escaping from me. So I continued to grab it another 2 times to try and prevent it from escaping, but after the 3rd bite I accepted my fate that I was not going to have a snake, and my thoughts then twisted to me being concerned for my life. And because I was young, I panicked and I thought I was going to die, and it was all quite a bit of a scene, but my friend's father managed to calm me down. And that was the first time I got bitten, which was certainly the most nerve-wracking time and exciting. There were so many things going on. The snake was escaping, I was getting bitten, I didn't know what to do. So that was the first time. Thereafter, the snake bites that I've received have been in a more relaxed environment, where I've been less surprised by the fact that they've bitten me, and less concerned as to trying to keep a snake that wanted to go away, if that makes any sense. So I have been bitten by a few snakes. Eastern tiger snake, which is probably the most beautiful snake I've been bitten for. All the snakes that I've been bitten by have been very mildly venomous. I've had no actual knowledge or feeling or any difference, nausea, nothing from the snakes that have bitten me. A lot of constrictors, brown house snakes, corn snakes, which you get in America. They're popular pets here. A few of the snakes. I did have a menagerie of pets growing up. Aviaries of birds, 6 different fish tanks, snake tanks, scorpion tanks, spider tanks. What am I forgetting? Hamsters. So I've had quite a few pets, of which some were snakes and some of them bit me. But I've never been bitten by a venomous snake. And I actually don't... I know one person from this industry, and obviously over the years I would have met a lot of different people working in this industry. I know one person that has been bitten by a venomous snake. He lost his trigger finger, his forefinger, at the first knuckle, and he was bitten by a snake that actually causes a lot of injuries, not fatalities, more. Oh, awesome. I hope you heard that, folks. There was a flock of potentially quilias that flew over, and I think that's what we heard fly over us earlier. You may have just heard a small phew. Have you got them, Romeo?
Gone.
Okay, they were going too quickly. But we'll be ready for the next flock that comes over to try and catch onto them. They're moving so quickly, then I hope you did hear that. So, snakes, yes, if you have bitten me, where was I going before the quilias flew over?
Friend bitten.
The friend who was bitten on his forefinger. So this snake, which is called a stiletto snake or a burrowing asp snake, looks very similar to 2 different non-venomous species called mole snakes and a Natal black snake. These 3 snakes all look very similar, short black snakes, and the difference is that the one out of the 3 is fairly highly venomous, the stiletto snake or burrowing asp. And interestingly enough, it's got a very strange dental structure in that its one fang can come out the side of its mouth at an angle. So unlike most snakes, if you pick them up behind the head, they can't bite you if you've got them gripped properly. Whereas these, they just turn their head to the side and their fang that sticks out the corner of their mouth just pricks you. Ding! And that little prick is what happened to my friend Neil. And he woke up the following morning, or he actually battled to sleep that night, but he thought it was the non-venomous snake that had just grazed him, a Natal black snake or mole snake. Anyway, he ended up losing half his finger. But the moral of the story is that with all the people that I know that spend a lot of times in high snake density areas or high density snake areas, and even handle snakes when you need to catch them and remove them from rooms or from the lodge areas, only one of them has been bitten. So your chances of being bitten, unless you're handling snakes, is slim. I know for a fact if I had never handled a snake, I wouldn't have been bitten by one up till date. All the snakes that I've handled have been self-induced bites, and if we just left them to do what they wanted to do, 99% of the time they wouldn't cause any trouble. There are the exceptions though. A story pops to mind from this area when I worked here a few years ago. One of the maintenance workers went into the workshop to get some tools, and he opened a cupboard, and on the shelf that was eye level was a Mozambican spinning cobra. And obviously if you were in a cupboard hiding and somebody opened the doors, you'd get a bit of a fright and want to defend yourself. So that was the initial cause for the Mozambican spinning cobra to defend itself. The second reason, which is an important reason, is that it had just shed its skin, so it's still in kind of like a slightly vulnerable point. It was halfway through shedding, so it's got this extra skin that slows it down and doesn't make them as quick. And when snakes are shedding, they are known to be more aggressive and likely to cause trouble. So this snake was halfway through shedding. These doors got open, it was eye level, and it just spat into the poor guy's face. It was a spitting cobra. You get some cobras that don't spit. but this was a spitting variety, which we get here. And thankfully all we did was have to, because of the treatment for a lot of venom that spats into eyes, or anything that gets into your eyes really, is just to rinse it out with water is the best thing. Slowly, not harshly, so just a gentle tap for as long as you can, maybe 10 minutes, just under a flowing tap, gently getting all of that liquid out your eye. It's important to remember, if you get spats in your left eye, not to let the water run from your left eye to your right eye, so that's something to think about. So always get it flowing out of the eyes directly, and specifically if it's one eye, not to get it flowing into the other. So we just rinsed his eye out, took him to hospital, and the doctor there gave him some really good, I guess, antibiotic, steroid eye drops that within a few days he was back to normal, but he did say it felt like his eyeballs were on fire when the venom did hit them. So other than a rare case like that, your chances of anything going wrong are slim. You've got more chance injuring yourself walking down the stairs at work than being bitten by a snake. So that is a thought that needs to be remembered, especially for those of you who may be irrationally scared of snakes and scorpions and spiders. I mean, how many people do you actually know that have come into trouble with these animals that cause people hours of unrest or sleepless nights or terror? It's not necessary. Some oxpeckers flying over looking for any potential tick-loaded animals like buffalo or impala. All the animals have got ticks on them, so that's what the oxpecker is looking for. They've got a wide variety of choices really. The predators don't get the same treatment as the herbivores do though. When it comes to oxpeckers grooming them, that predators have to do it themselves for obvious reasons. They would try and snack on those oxpeckers if they got half a chance. Excuse me. Okay, I'm just going to have a sip of water. And see what other questions have come through. Jason's trying his best, folks. It's ambitious. But the flocks of quailias, we think they are red-billed quailias, that keep flying. It's incredible, the flight paths that are moving over this tree today. And that's another great thing about just positioning yourself in one place. You learn these strange little things that I find interesting, like the red-billed buffalo weavers, literally flying a lot of the time between a gap. I don't know if you can see occasionally a little black blur shooting through the screen, but they've been flying between the canopy of this tree, the fringe of the canopy, to go and collect their nesting material fairly consistently. And then these quailias, this was the third flock this morning that's flown literally directly over this tree and then down in the same direction. So who knows, maybe it's the same flock doing loops, or different flocks arriving or flying to wherever they need to get to at different periods of time.
I'm gonna wipe the screen one more time. Is it?
Okie dokie, no problem. There we go. Now folks, look at how beautiful that bird is. Ah, awesome. Well done, Jason. It was a brief glimpse, folks, but those are often the best, the brief but beautiful encounters we get out here. So that bird is called a violet-backed starling, and I'm actually just going to bring it out into the book for you. Jenny, I haven't forgotten about your question. Let me actually finish that quickly. So, in short, venom needs to be injected into your bloodstream, whereas poison is ingested. So, any animal that injects something into you is injecting a venom, whereas a poison would be something like a milky latex from a tree. That would be poisonous if it got into your skin or into your, if you ate a poisonous seed, that would be poison. So that, I think, should clear up your question. Thank you. Now we are looking for the violet-backed starling, formerly known as the plum-colored starling. And what we didn't manage to show you, but what did happen there, was that, where's going to be the best place to do this?
Just on the...
Okay. So, we can see the beautiful violet-backed starling that you all got a glimpse of now. In the sunshine they really do light up, and there's a beautiful purple sheen to that coat. But these are the males, the brightly colored ones. As often in the bird kingdom, the males are more spectacularly dressed than the woman. The woman here is a little bit more drab. She does have a nice speckled chest though, but distinct dimorphism between the two sexes. So that's a good one to see, the violet-backed starling. Let's see what they tell us about it here. If there's anything of interest. So they are migratory, that is an important thing to mention. They're intra-African, so they come from further north of us in Central Africa down to the southern parts for the summer. So they'll be here until about April. They would have arrived in October. So the pair that we just saw now would have been monogamous, and a lot of the birds are monogamous, so they pair for life. And they nest in natural holes in trees, which is good to know, to look for any potential nests from them. The incubation's only by the female, which is interesting because a lot of the time they take turns. So obviously the male will then specialize in feeding the female while she incubates rather than taking turns, and interesting how it works that way. Whereas, like I say, a lot of birds do just take turns. And then it's occasionally parasitized by both the greater and lesser honey guides. So the honey guide's name can be misleading because yes, they can lead even humans like us and animals like honey badgers or different animals that may be interested in feeding on honey. Honey guides will be known, and they have done it before. I've done it before, where you see a honey guide making a call, making quite a commotion, and you literally follow it from tree to tree, and it leads you to a beehive in the hope that you as a human will raid it, or a honey badger may raid it, and it will get to feed on all of the scraps and bits of honey, as well as one or two of the bees I'm sure they'll feed on that are stuck in the honey, that have been immobilized. So they do get parasitized by these two birds, greater and lesser honey guides. And this basically means the honey guides come in, lay an egg in the nest somehow, they must distract the female and get her out the nest somehow, lay an egg and then leave. And often with the birds that do parasitize other birds, like the cuckoos, which are more well known for it, they've developed to a point where they can ensure that the egg needs to be incubated for a shorter period of time than your typical bird, and this increases the chances of their egg hatching first. If their egg hatches first, it starts being fed first, and what that does is that by the time the other eggs hatch, the other chick is so big that it completely outcompetes them and gets all the food when they do get fed. So interesting, harsh. Nature can be harsh. We mustn't forget that. It's not all tranquil and peaceful as it may appear on mornings like this. There's a lot of behind the scenes dodgy activity going on, a lot of stealing and, I guess, unethical behavior going on. But that's nature for you. Good. Well, I enjoyed that bird sighting. I hope you did. I'm sure we'll have a few more coming through to us. And just to recap, folks, for those of you that may have rejoined us or joined us fairly recently, we are in a treehouse structure. It's a platform in a beautiful marula tree, and Jason's on camera here with me, and Alex is in control. Mark and Vim have got a very important role, and they'll be working harder than anyone at the moment. They've probably got their heads underneath the Land Rover, getting a lot of sand in their eyes, sweating, hurting their fingers with the spanners and the bolts and all the tight angles that you have to work with. But they are probably under Zanele at the moment, fixing the problem that we've had with the connection that powers the fuel pump. So we managed to fix it briefly yesterday, but because we didn't have the right equipment to fix it, the temporary bush mechanic plan we made didn't last very long, and ended up towing Zanele twice yesterday, once in the morning and once in the evening. So Mark and VM are there working on Zanele. What's the time? I'm guessing it shouldn't be taking them much longer, but you never know what problems they may have encountered. And I guess they are going to want to make sure they get it right 100% now, because the tricky thing with the fixing that needs to be done is that the fuel tank needs to be removed, and obviously there's a bit of fuel in it now, so that we filled it up, which makes it really heavy, and there's tight angles and a lot of different bolts that need to come out to get that fuel tank out. And then on top of the fuel tank we need to do a bit of rewiring and everything, and when you push the fuel tank back in, that's when we think we damaged our temporary connection yesterday, because it is quite a difficult and awkward maneuver getting this fuel tank in. But that's what they'll be working through at the moment, but hopefully we will be out there in not too much longer. Okay. Andreen on Twitter, why do you call Jason Romeo? We'll just leave that to your imagination, but good question. Kelly, email. Hello Kelly on email. Can you tell the story behind your bracelets? I can. So, Romeo, would you mind zooming into my bracelets? Okay, so we'll start with the snake. This snake is probably the coolest of the bracelets, I think, and the reason is the story behind it. This bracelet was made for me in an area called Samburu in central Kenya, or what's often termed as northern Kenya. It's kind of the last bit of actual inhabitation of Kenya, ends generally in the center parts, and from the center to the north of Kenya it's kind of barren wasteland. Not barren wasteland, but there's not too much inhabitation in the northern half of Kenya. So we were in central Kenya in Samburu, had a friend of mine's lodge there, and they get these Samburu blacksmiths to come in and make jewelry for the guests, which I think is a great idea. And the Samburu blacksmith that arrived on this specific day looked like a gladiator. He was like 7 feet tall, strapped with muscles, and he had walked 4 hours from his home to get to the camp where we were to do this jewelry making course. And making jewelry for the local Kenyan people is a huge part of their tradition. It's not something that's been influenced too much by Western culture. They've always adorned themselves, a lot of the different African cultures, and a lot of the time the men are actually more elaborately dressed or adorned than the females. So they do make bracelets in this area and have been for thousands of years, and they basically make a blower to make sure the fire gets hot enough out of goat skin. So they a lot of them are nomadic people, especially in that area, livestock herders, and goats are one of the main livestock that they do farm. So from some of the skins that they've obviously kept from goats that have been slaughtered, they create a blowing device, so a homemade goat skin blower, to be able to get the flames of the fire to a really hot temperature. That way being allowing this is aluminium that they've melted down, and they melted it down actually in a baked bean tin, an old baked bean tin, which was interesting, and created a small rift in the sand and poured the molten metal into that rift that then keeps it in a kind of long, fairly tubular shape. And then out comes the hammer and anvil, and they hammered and anviled for quite some time. And typically what gets done with these bracelets is that they fashion a diamond shape at each end, and then the two diamonds meet and that's just the way it gets done. But I asked the guy to do an adaptation and leave the one diamond head, but rather than creating another one that would essentially meet at the snake's mouth, I just got him to extend it and create a bit of a tail, and we just put 2 little beads in as the eyes, and he used a kind of screwdriver, like a broken screwdriver essentially, to hammer in all of the little dents for the scales. So I really like this one, and it was made by a Samburu blacksmith in a very beautiful place in Kenya. It is one of the most beautiful camps I've been to in northern Kenya, and do yourselves a favor and check out Sarara Camp, Sarara, in northern Kenya. It's an incredibly beautiful place, and this is where the bangle came from, Sarara Lodge. The brown wooden one, which is a kind of bamboo, I think, this is a friend of mine bought to add to my collection. Thanks Murray, he bought this in Thailand. Then the green one, Walking for Lions, came from another friend of mine who works for a fund that generates charity for lion conservation, and what they do is a lot of work in areas where there's human-lion conflict, so where animals like lions still exist and roam freely without any fences, and where people do farm livestock. Obviously there are problems because lions like to eat cows, it's easy, or goats. So he works for this charity that helps educate people as to ways to prevent livestock being eaten, and how best for humans and lions to coexist, because it is necessary and it is happening in a lot of parts of Africa. So one of the systems that they using a lot of the funds for is a very clever but simple plan, and a lot of the best plans are the simple ones, which was made by a young Kenyan, a Maasai boy. I think he was 9 years old when he told his dad to try out this plan, and basically he thought that if they could attach small flashing lights around the perimeter of their boma, which is a word I used earlier, and a boma essentially is any round structure often made out of wood to protect you. So it's sticks in a circular formation, and it can be a lot of thorn branches or tall big branches. It's just a small there's another buffalo weaver that just flew over our heads, so sorry if I lost focus there. Around these circular wooden structures that are often used to protect livestock, so they'll use a lot of these acacia thorns and push all the branches together, but lions can still get through them if they really want to. It's not foolproof. So by putting a flashing light around the perimeter of these wooden fences, the son thought that it would deter predators, and it certainly does. It doesn't require a lot of battery power. All it requires is a simple LED light. So what started with this young kid's idea in the middle of the Masai Mara somewhere, or surrounds, they move huge distances, the Masai people. This concept is now being spread and developed through different manyatas, which is the name for their villages. They're semi-nomadic, so they have these semi-permanent villages called manyatas in East Africa, and these flashing lights are doing a great job deterring predators and preventing them from coming and stealing cattle. So funds from this Walking for Lions charity are going towards putting in these lights and battery packs into different bomas or manyatas. The next one, the leather one, is also from a friend of mine. He started a anti-rhino poaching fund or charity, so all proceeds from these bracelets go towards rhino anti-poaching. And the final one, which is looking a bit worse for wear, was from a holiday to Greece a few months ago, family holiday to Greece. So that is the story behind the bangles. And then there's also the bracelet with my name on, which was made by a wonderful lady called Evelyn, who I worked with in Kenya in an area called Magadi, Lake Magadi, in the southern Rift Valley of Kenya. Beautiful, beautiful area. And this was given to me at the beginning of the year. So really intricate design, and a lot of the African cultures are highly talented when it comes to beadwork. Okay. Thanks, Kelly, for that question. Okie dokie. What is my favorite African bird? From Blue Jay on Twitter. Good morning, Blue Jay. How are you? I hope everything is well over there. And the most favorite African bird. Oof. One that comes to mind, and it often does, is the African crowned eagle. And I'll get it out in the book to show you guys, because it is a bird worth seeing. An incredibly pretty bird, and a hardcore raptor, one of the most hardcore raptors, I believe. It can take exceptionally large prey, up to the size of monkeys, vervet monkeys, and it's got a beautiful coloration. I like to describe it as a tiger of the bird community. Now, I've never seen a tiger in real life, but these, I think, are the tiger equivalents of the birding world. It's the bird on the bottom left, and it lives mainly in forest areas, so sadly we don't get them here. I've seen one here in all my time here, and it was probably a bit lost. They require quite dense forest and thick forest, and they're highly specialized for that. They've got short wings relative to their body size, but very deep, and that makes sense for forest dwelling because they need to maneuver between branches. They can apparently fly from the ground floor directly up to the canopy of a tree. Now, if you think of most birds or an airplane, unless it's a helicopter, it's very difficult to go straight up, but these short broad wings and incredible power allow them to be very maneuverable in tight spaces. They've got a large crown, hence their name, crowned eagle, that they can flare on their head. Sorry, I should probably put that down. That they can flare up on their head, and in flight they've got the beautiful stripes and the orange. That's why I guess I get a little bit of the tigery colorations and markings. But yes, they can take very big prey as big as vervet monkeys. Their talons are now, and I know for a fact how big they are because a friend of mine has rescued one of these, a friend of mine in Kenya, and it was injured, and now he's rehabilitating it, and we had to hold on to it to check how its wing was reforming. Probably stands about this tall, but it's probably only 4.5, 5 kgs, so 10, 11 pounds, not heavy relative to us. And despite its relatively small size, when I was holding on to each of its legs, it was on its back, it was thrusting me up at such an incredible rate and power that I couldn't believe, holding on to just its legs. It was really tossing me around while my friend was checking out its wing. And what I realized when I was down there holding on to its legs is that its talons were as long as my fingers. Now that's just the talon, that's just the nail, that's as long as my finger. So I've got small hands, but their talons and claws are far bigger than this hand. So you can imagine being a monkey and looking up and just seeing these talons swooping in on you. It wouldn't be a nice feeling. So they do have big feet with very big nails, and I would not like one to grip onto me. I've heard that from this friend of mine who was rehabilitating it. Now, to rehabilitate it and to do any form of falconry, often leather gloves are used for the birds to land on when you are training them to fly again and everything. And his leather glove is reinforced because their power is so intense that apparently they can break a human forearm not from impact, just from crushing power. So if they were to just wiggle around your arm a bit, a 5 kilo, 10 pound, 12 pound bird could break your arm. It's a scary thought, and it's an important thing to remember excuse me, with wild animals. You can even think of your dog and cats, how quick it is, a domestic dog or a domestic cat, how quick and powerful it is for its size. Now imagine animals like lions or even bigger things, how strong and powerful they are, and especially if they're wild and they're living wild, they can often be very, very strong for their size. So it can be deceptive as us as a human thinking, oh well, that impala only weighs 60 kilograms or 50 kilograms and I weigh 80 kilograms, so if we were to get into a wrestle, I'd come out on top. You're very wrong. Their size to weight ratio to power is a lot more efficient than ours. So yes, the crowned eagle is probably my favorite African bird. I sadly haven't seen them very much. I would love to be able to do a documentary on them. I have thought about them a lot, because if you could somehow document their life and the beautiful jungles that they live in and forests that they live in, and their intense hunting style and the habitat in which they hunt and the prey in which they hunt, you would have for a riveting documentary on the crowned eagle. As for a lot of the other birds of prey, that it is a difficult thing that doesn't help birds in terms of what we know about them and what we perceive of them, because for us to show you a leopard or a lion or a cheetah hunting and at full speed, that's what allows them to showcase their brilliance, and it's what makes people love them to a degree, well, entirely, I think. And that's because we have been able to show you this, and different people have been able to experience their brilliance and their beauty, whereas you do get animals like the birds of prey that, yes, we may be able to show you their beauty, but can we show you them hunting effectively, or can we show you them working at their prime, at their best? So if we could show raptors and their hunting and their brilliance better, it would be awesome. And I think with technology, you know, soon we might be able to have a tiny little camera that doesn't impact on a bird's day-to-day ongoings, that you could put on a bird and live stream, I guess, from the back of a crowned eagle and just follow them from day to day. But we're not quite yet there. Another bird I'd love to be able to film closely or have a camera on their back would be the peregrine falcon, the fastest animal on earth. They can reach speeds of up to, what's it in miles an hour? It's over 200 kilometers an hour, I believe, or there and thereabouts. So about 120 miles an hour. Yeah, 120 miles an hour is how fast a peregrine falcon can go, often in a tear-shaped body formation, and they just plummet from the sky. And they can kill prey often bigger than them, simply by the impact of them hitting into their prey, often unbeknownst that anything was even chasing them. They just all of a sudden, their careers are ended by the peregrine falcon, which is an exceptionally fast bird that I would love to see. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit distracted by all the birds that are calling around here. So yeah, that is where we are at now with the birds. Let me have another check on the cell phone device here. Okay. If you could be any animal, what would you be and why? Well, Xenia, good morning. I guess to follow on from the last question, this morning my answer to that question will be the crowned eagle. But if you ask me the same question tomorrow, I may want to be a different animal. So it does depend a lot on the mood that I'm in. But today I would like to be a crowned eagle. even here, even though it's not the perfect habitat for them, I wouldn't mind just flying around in some crowned eagle feathers through this area. But for me it does kind of vary on day to day. Being any different animal will come with benefits and disadvantages. One of the big ones that I think of often is choosing to be an animal like a leopard. As great as it would be, I personally am not too good at spending time alone, and leopards are solitary animals. So as much as you think it would be great, there are aspects of being a leopard that aren't great. That being an impala would be better. You've got lots of friends around, safety in numbers, and just company, I guess, that leopards often don't have. So my answer to that question will vary daily. But Xenia, good one. And today I'd be a crowned eagle hunting vervet monkeys in a jungle somewhere. Do I have a favorite insect or arachnid? From Sarberia Zumi on Twitter. Good morning. How are you doing? Favorite insect or arachnid? Stick insects are really cool. I don't know anyone that doesn't like stick insects or doesn't get kind of drawn in when one is found. Brian also loves them. Brian's certainly got a thing for stick insects for some reason. But that is one that I really like, just their unique body shape and the way that they've evolved to pretend that they're a stick is quite a bizarre thing to get to, but that's where they are. And very interesting anatomy, huge long legs, but very long thin legs that carry the stick-like body that they kind of jiggle forward and backward as they move to kind of simulate being a branch on a tree. So stick insect is a good one, but there's a lot of insects that are really interesting. And again, to go back to the whole dilemma of the animals that you can showcase easily are often the ones that are now the most popular, but there are so many animals that it's difficult to showcase that are equally as interesting or potentially more interesting or better hunters or more beautiful but just tiny, that they don't get a lot of publicity. And the insect kingdom is a perfect example of that. There's so many different insects that are simply too small or too difficult to film at this stage. And like I say, with technology the way it's going, we are going to be able to start delving deeper and deeper into the insect kingdom and the small animal kingdom. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting insects out there. Arachnid, I would tend to prefer scorpions in general over spiders. I've got a thing with scorpions. I really enjoy picking them up and playing with them and examining them closely and then letting them go again. They are cool animals to handle. It's a bit of an adrenaline rush, and there's just something about them that I really like. But an arachnid that I am looking forward to see grow in the next few months is something called the golden orbweb spider. And I did see a small piece of nest here, or nest web rather. Okay. Romeo, do you think you're going to be able to, it's a long shot, but you might be able to get it just to here. Just need to try and put something behind it. You got it there. It's just here. Oh!
Yep.
Have you got it?
Put your hand behind it. Now there.
Okay, so folks, you may have got a little glimpse.
Left. There, more, just a little bit. There you go. Wait. There it is.
Okay, folks, so it's not easy, but this is a tiny golden orbweb spider. Mark actually showed me one yesterday that was even smaller than this. And are we doing there? So this is a golden orbweb spider. It's tiny, okay? It is going to, I don't want to put my hand in there too much because I don't want to break its web, so we're just going to leave it at that. So I'm glad you got a glimpse. I don't know what Jason's giving me sign language. I don't know what it means though, but he's given up on me. So I'll just carry on as if nothing ever happened. So that is a tiny golden orb-web spider, and the first one I actually saw of this summer season was yesterday, one that Mark pointed out. It was tiny, and Mark is great at really spotting these small little creatures, and he is so knowledgeable about the smaller animals, and it's lovely spending time with him because that knowledge isn't common, and it only comes with great experience. So one of the huge advantages of having a guy like Mark here is that you do learn so much from him. And where I'm going with this is that the golden orb-web spider is a beautiful spider. It creates a beautiful golden orb web that's golden color and very strong. Now that spider that you saw there, which is tiny, I mean absolutely tiny, in a few months time will be, legs and all, it'll be that big. You won't battle to focus on, yeah, Jason won't have any problem focusing on them in a few months time. So they live in these beautiful big nests, big spider, beautiful coloration. Their cousin, the garden orb-web spider, is another incredibly beautiful, I think maybe even more beautiful than the golden orb-web spider. They've got an incredible abdomen with silver and yellow lines on it. So there are some really pretty arachnids out there in the spider family. So those will begin to develop in the next few months. Okay. Thank you for that question, Saberia Zumi. Okay. A question has just come through from Joe on Twitter. Did Wild Earth use recorded footage for Big Cat Week? Morning, Joe. Good question. And the answer to that is no, with a little bit of yes. So predominantly no with a little bit of yes. What was done during the weeks leading up to Big Cat Week was that stock footage was filmed, and this was used as a backup plan in case everything went wrong and we couldn't transmit anything, which could well have happened. So understandably, Nat Geo needed a bit of backup footage from the area of what has been happening that they could cut to if need be. But for any of you that were watching the Big Cat Week, you would have noticed that everything flowed and there was nothing that didn't piece together, and that was simply because we didn't need to cut back to any stock footage that was filmed, I mean, only from a few weeks before, but not live, obviously, which is what we pride ourselves on. So stock footage was filmed, yes, for the events of a crisis, but there was no crisis big enough other than a few tiny 5-second, 10-second cutouts. Other than that, it was all live footage. So it's an important part of the experience, and there's no shortcuts that you can take to pretend things are live. It's only live or it's not live, and there's no halfway ground. And that's what Wild Earth is all about. It's about live currents, nothing censored, nothing taken, no take twos. It is what it is. So it's a great concept, and very happy to be a part of it because I'm loving the live aspect, and it's a new world for me and a new world for a lot of people. It's a new form of entertainment, I think, and one that is very applicable to where we are in terms of entertainment in this day and age. We've gone through many different phases, and I think the live, real aspect that is now possible with technology and a dream, I guess, of Graham Wallington, who started this many years ago. It's possible, and something that's so special, and something that I know he wouldn't want to tamper with in any way. The fact that, you know, using stock footage would detract from everything that Wild Earth is believing in at the moment and does believe in. So good question. I hope that answers it. But essentially No, the answer is no, but you can see why I said yes with a little bit of no regarding the big cat footage. Have you ever felt in danger on safari? From Ben on email. Yes, I have. Numerous times. Sometimes in the vehicle, but more often on foot. Your chances of something going wrong in a vehicle, Ben, are very slim. Occasionally, yes, elephants do crash into vehicles, buffalo too. Elephants have even been known to roll vehicles around. But those are most often, and I say most often because it's not always the case, but it's most often in places like the Kruger National Park, where you could come as a tourist, rent a car in Johannesburg and drive yourself into the Kruger Park and then drive yourself around with no guide. You just stick to the roads and do whatever you think best. Now, the problem that creates, and I mean that for me is great, that you do have that freedom to be able to come here and drive yourself around the Kruger National Park. It's fantastic. But what it does mean is that there are scenarios where an elephant may be in a bit of a mood or behaving in a way that it needs to be stood up to, which is often the case, and not run away from. And you might find people trying to reverse or get away, or the opposite, putting too much pressure on an animal, causing it to charge. But either way, you get people that don't necessarily know what they're doing in an area where there's a lot of big animals that can roll cars around. So it does happen occasionally with elephant, but I've had very few stories of rangers having, or field guides having, any problem with animals on a vehicle. On the other hand, when you're walking, animals look at you very differently to when you're on a vehicle, and that could be for a few reasons. The fact that on foot you're more likely to startle an animal. It's less likely to know that you're approaching, as it would if you're in a big vehicle making noise, therefore not startling an animal. And also in the vehicle, the animals have become used to us, and it's been easier to habituate an animal to a human in a vehicle than to a human on foot. Now, I don't know the exact reason behind that, but that is the bottom line, possibly because we're not walking upright as we have been for hundreds of thousands of years, and that image has been ingrained in animals. And typically from thousands of years ago, when we used to hunt and live amongst these animals, they may have an ingrained fear of the upright human figure, whereas in a vehicle you're sitting down and you don't have that figure to deal with in terms of the response of the animal. The bottom line is animals are less habituated to us on foot, and you've got more chance of giving them a fright on foot. And if you do give them a fright, either they run away or they run towards you. Those are the two options. So sometimes they have run towards me, and it's been all the animals you can think of, all the dangerous animals you can think of. But my closest encounter was with an elephant. It was the closest I came to thinking, if I don't shoot this animal, it will kill me. But thankfully it didn't, and I'm here to tell the tale without any scratches or scars, and without having a dead elephant to live with. Yeah, it's always exciting being on foot, and even if it's just a bird flying off, a francolin or anything, any little rustle in the grass, it's an excitement and a feeling that you don't get in any other situation, because nothing is more leveling than being on foot in a proper wild area in Africa, I don't think, because it really does put you in your place. You feel how you should feel on this planet, small and relatively insignificant, and that's what we are at the end of the day. I guess we're all tiny little parts of this massive machine, and sometimes I think in our big wide world, concrete jungles, we may lose track of where we fit in the whole grand scheme of things. But we just like the rest of these animals, and when you're out here on foot with them, you do realize that you have a lot more respect for them and a lot more curiosity about them when you are on foot. So something that I love doing is walking through the bush, and thankfully, despite all the threats that there are out there, the chances of an animal committing to a full attack are very slim, and again, like the snake bites, I know very few guides that have had any trouble regarding animal encounters. So yeah, I have had quite a few scary encounters, but the elephant one was probably the most. Okay, Mark on email, are there different species of golden orb spiders? As far as I know, there's different species of orb spiders, and the golden orb is one of them. The garden orb is another one, and there's a few more of the orbs that I can't think of at the moment, but there are different orb web spiders, but I don't think you get different golden orbs. I think you only get the golden orb and different orb web spiders thereafter, but I do stand to be corrected there. So it's the golden and the garden, G-A-R-D-E-N, that garden. Chris on Twitter, do you plan to use flying drones to locate game? I don't personally. It's a good idea. It certainly is going forward, but for me, we need to be careful about how much we use technology to find animals, and it is works. And I think the barking is Bruno, because Bruno wants to come. Hello, welcome back, Twin Spots. How was breakfast? Shame, I'm not sure if you can see him down there, but I'm sure Romeo will come and point the camera in the right direction. He's coming straight back to the spot where he was earlier. Let me see if I can show you guys. And he's looking out over his terrain. There he is. So he's got a little head through the gap there in the balustrade, and he's looking at whatever he was looking at earlier, potentially just this beautiful patch of his territory, which you can't blame him for. He does have a beautiful garden, old Twin Spots, and what I'll tell you about Twin Spots is that he is named after a bird. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show you the bird that he's named after. Hello, Twin Spot, come here. Oh, hello. Hello, boy. Hello. Okay, now that I've called him out of shots, I'm going to try and take him back into shots. And I'm going to get back into shot as well. Jason just left me stranded here, folks, but he sent Twin Spot back to look after me. Come on. Come on. Let me get Twin Spot up here. Seeing as that Twin Spot's the only one that wants to come and play with me in the treehouse, we'll let him come and play. Oh, you don't look comfortable here, do you? Okay, where was I going with this? Sounds like Bruno's coming as well, folks. I don't know how Bruno's going to do getting down the stairs, but he should be able to make it up okay. Jason's running after him. Ah, here's Bruno. Morning, Bruno. Hello, boy. Hello, boy. Slowly up here. I'm just worried these railings, some of them are coming a bit loose. Hey, slowly. Slowly, Bruno. See, the whole treehouse is shaking now. Bruno wants to play. And what I'm worried about is that the slats and the vertical slats on this balustrade, some of them are coming loose. And when the dogs poke their head out, I'm worried one of the slats is going to fall out along with the dog. Anyway, Jason's trying to do his best to coax Bruno down. Bruno's a bit boisterous for this treehouse. Sorry, I need to carry on sitting here, otherwise I'm going to be out of shot. So, where I was going with this was that with using technology, it is important, but we don't want to use too much technology, and that way that way Bruno's back. That way lose the thrill of the chase and the excitement of finding animals. So where I'm going with this is, if we were to use too much technology, and there is already technology available, we could have all the leopards and lions in the Sabi Sands collared, getting SMS updates every half an hour as to their exact GPS location. And yes, that would be great for showing animals, but it would lose out on that thrill of the chase and lose out on that excitement of tracking animals. And sadly, it is something that's very difficult for us to portray to you guys, the excitement of tracking an animal, following its footprints, for two reasons. The cameras and equipment aren't at a point that we can be portable. If we could walk and follow the tracks and take you on all the pathways and get you off the vehicle and show you the tracks and describe them to you, then it would make tracking a more likely thing for us to be able to do with you. But at the moment we can't really track animals. We can follow their tracks down the road, and that's where it ends. Whereas for guests that are coming to stay here, all of the lodges here have got a tracker that sits on a seat on the hood of the vehicle, specially made seat for them to sit there, so they've got a good vantage point of the road. And this art of tracking and skill of tracking and excitement of tracking is part of the experience of coming here. So it's not something that's done everywhere in Africa, but South Africa is very popular, and that's a lot to do with the habitat that we have here. A lot of our vegetation is thick and requires tracking to be able to find animals, whereas in East Africa, you know, areas like the Masai Mara, it's very open, so it's easier just to spot animals as opposed to tracking them there. But it is a good question, and I wonder how long it will take before drones are being used. Dave on email: what are the pros and cons of habituating some of the animals? Okay, this is it can lead to be a sensitive subject, because you get people that are of the opinion that we mustn't interfere at all with animals, and we must let them carry on with their lives without us being involved. And yes, this is true, but we've already done too much damage to not be involved, and we need to be involved in order to rescue what is a dire situation regarding conservation throughout the world. There's still areas where habitat destruction is phenomenal, and if it's not the habitat that's being destructed, it's the animals themselves that are being slaughtered for various different reasons. Now, what habituating an animal does is, in my mind, is it allows us to be able to show that animal to you, and unless an animal can be seen, it is not earning, it's not paying its dues. And not that they need to pay their dues to be here on this planet, they certainly don't. But a leopard that is being filmed and photographed and looked at by thousands of tourists in its lifetime is making other leopards known about and creating funds for conserving leopards in the future. Whereas in an area where leopards are not habituated, which is most parts of Africa, there are leopard occurring that you cannot see and will not see because they won't let you. How are they contributing to that conservation area? A leopard, and I'll stay with this the topic of leopard to try and drive this point home. This area that we're in is world renowned for leopard viewing, and that's because they're habituated. You've got other areas with the same amounts of leopard as here, but they're not habituated, therefore you don't see them. And that area is not a world-renowned leopard viewing area. Now, is a world-renowned leopard viewing area gonna attract more tourists than an area that's not a world-renowned leopard viewing area, yet has leopards? So it's an example of how, because it's habituated, it's creating a revenue for conservation and therefore allowing conservation to continue. That is the positive side of habituating animals. The negative side, and I'll stay with leopard as an example to try and keep it similar because it does vary between different animals. The problem with habituating a leopard, it would be that it becomes comfortable with human existence. Therefore, if it was to get pushed out of a territory naturally and it came up to a fence, which there are around the Sabi Sands, even though we are open to the Kruger National Park, which is a massive ecosystem, a fully natural ecosystem that doesn't need any man-made intervention or any influence whatsoever. It can sustain itself naturally because it's big enough to. Now, despite that, there are fences around the camp, and what that fence does, sorry about Bruno's claws on the floor, folks, but Bruno wants to stay, so he'll stay, and we just have to deal with the tapping and wobbling of the deck. Sorry about that. Jason has tried to get him down, but he won't leave. So the problem with habituating leopard is that they'll become accustomed with humans, and then if one was to escape out of the reserve or be forced out of the reserve or into an area where there are humans, due to territorial disputes with other leopards, so it's ended up there on a natural occurrence, but now it finds itself in an unnatural situation where there may be more humans, livestock, potential conflict. That would be an example of where habituation can be negative, but in my opinion it's a risk that does need to be taken, because like I say, unless you can show people animals and see them, it's very difficult to generate awareness and funding to conserve them. And this area is an exact example of that. If we were to fence off this area and be like, there are no humans allowed in the Kruger National Park, how on earth would the South African government justify having this huge portion of their country that doesn't generate any revenue? There's not many places in the world that just accept zero revenue for any patch of land. So conservation does need to make money. Like everything in life, you do need money to exist and to look after things, and conservation is one of those things. So this area does a great job at it, and in a relatively small area I think a lot of money is generated for conservation, and it does conserve this area. Even if the money that is conserving this area goes into somebody's back pocket, it doesn't matter because it's still conserving this area. I'm beginning to waffle now, well, I have been the whole morning, and I've just had a vehicle arrive. I don't know if it's Zanele, but it could be. We'll see in a few minutes, but we did hear a vehicle arrive just now, and it could be that we are ready to go out on an adventure. Sadly though, in the last 5 minutes, the drizzle has started to set in, and here where we are, slightly covered by the canopy of this marula tree, it's not an issue. And the other factor that we need to bear in mind is that we're not moving. If we were to be driving around in this, the camera and everything would get quite wet. Jason's busy carrying Bruno down the stairs. It's a very steep staircase, so an interesting sight to behold. So yeah, I guess those are some of the pros and cons, Dave. I don't know what your thoughts are on the habituation of animals, but there are pros and cons. But for me, I think it's fundamental for animals to be habituated to a degree in order for them to be conserved. Yeah, but yeah, I'd be interested to hear on other people's thoughts. Okay, what I'm going to do now, folks, is got a cool little book here that I actually haven't been paying enough attention to, but hopefully this will spur me on to using it more. I did use it when I was in this area a few years ago. Now I don't know if this is going to work because, like I said, Jason has left to go and take. So it's a tree book, Healing Plants of the Low Veld, which is where we are, and it's all the traditional uses, traditional medicinal uses for the different trees found in this area. So we are going to start with the marula tree. which makes sense because we are sitting in one. Okay, the fruits are high in vitamin C. This we have discussed, higher than an orange, and the fruits are very sweet. Depending on the tree, you do get some bitter ones, but a sweet fruit, you squeeze the seed into your mouth, and that seed's covered by a furry fruit that you don't actually chew on, you more suck, because it's just a thin layer of pulp, but a very juicy fruit that you suck on. It's mainly the liquid you're going for. The nuts are edible and act as an insecticide and disinfectant. The nuts are delicious. Within the seeds there's 2 small chambers which house the nuts, and they're difficult to get out, which is the problem. And if they were easier to get out and slightly bigger, I'm sure you'd be able to buy marula nuts the world over, but because they are quite a hard nut to harvest and quite small, you don't get them very widely. But the nuts are delicious, very rich and oily nuts, almost like a macadamia nut. Decoctions of the bark or roots are used for diarrhea, dysentery and peptic ulcer. Alternatively, the bark is chewed and swallowed. So different ways of achieving the same result there from the bark to help with diarrhea, dysentery and peptic ulcers. Folks, again, what I read from this book, there are some interesting things, and they are traditional medicines which are often beliefs and not necessarily factual remedies. So bear that in mind. The leaves can be chewed and there's stringent juice swallowed for indigestion. Interesting. A root infusion is anti-emetic and is also used for malaria, fever, headache, infertility, and as an aphrodisiac. So that would almost be good to do every day. An infusion of the roots. You're covering all your bases there with the root infusion. The bark sap is a good antihistamine. This I have heard of, and I've heard a lot of people saying that this antihistamine sap does work very well. I actually sadly haven't been in a position where I've needed to use it, so I can't comment on whether it does work from a personal experience, but from friends, and one that comes to mind is Peter Pretorius. He said he swears by the bark sap as a good antihistamine. Excuse me. The bark is used as a coagulant and the fruit as an insecticide. Again, leaf infusions and decoctions have a hypoglycemic effect and are used for diabetes. As you can see, folks, I mean, there's a lot of different uses that are believed to be useful to us humans from this marula tree. Bilharzia is also a roots infusion, and steam from the boiling roots helps sore eyes. So those are some of the interesting traditional uses used for the marula tree. And folks, Jason is a good cameraman and a clever man at the same time. He obviously heard me talking about the marulas and decided to collect some of the fruits after dropping off Bruno safely on ground level. The whole treehouse was shaking a little bit with him up here. Now, these fruits are fairly round in shape, and as you can see, they're still green. But what I'm going to try and do is show you what we do with them when they're yellow. So the best way to eat them is to... Ooh. No, that's not going to work. But basically, you would bite off... It's sour, but nice. You bite off a little hole on the top, and when they are ripe, they're a lot less hard, and you'd basically squeeze the bottom and the pip would pop into your mouth, and you'd suck all the juice out of the external casing, throw the casing away, suck on the seed for a while. Like I say, you can't actually chew on it. Well, you can, but it's a very thin layer of fruit that's difficult to get off. It's almost like what's the word? A kind of like that turf that you have on top of pool tables. That kind of a
Felt?
Like felt. That kind of a texture. So you can chew on them, but very sweet and delicious. But at the moment, you can't feed on them. They need to be yellow. I suppose you can make some kind of a preserve out of them now, but I must do some research onto that. So these are the marula fruits, and within that actual seed that you suck on are the delicious nuts that you can get out. What's the news on the vehicle?
It's still undergoing hectic surgery.
Okay.
But we'll see. It's not going to be out this drive.
Okay.
I don't think. So
potentially this afternoon.
Potentially this afternoon.
Okay, folks. Well, according to that update from Jason, who's been up and down the treehouse and getting various updates for me, the vehicle fixing for some reason is not going according to plan too much, because it shouldn't be taking too much longer, but maybe they've established what another problem could be, and that's good news, because as long as we know what the problem is, then we can try and fix it. But what we thought the problem was, we thought would have been fixed by now, but sadly not. So it looks like we're going to be here for the whole morning, but not a bad place to be stuck. I'm enjoying it. So, an email from Jack. What's your favorite reserve in Africa? And for me, that question is impossible to answer. I've seen so many beautiful places that all have their own unique or magical aspects to them. So I wouldn't be able to pick any one place in specific, but East Africa does have some of the most beautiful locations I have been to. But having said that, that could be simply because I've grown up in South Africa and become spoilt and used to the South African parks and reserves, which are incredible. And I'm not saying right now, what I must reiterate is, I'm not saying East Africa is better than South Africa or vice versa, or any country in Africa is better than the other. Each country and each reserve within Africa has got its benefits over the others and negatives. So I wouldn't be able to pick any one. If I could pick one, I would be working there permanently. For me, my goal is to base myself in a city and work as much as I can in the bush, taking people on safari, but be based in a city where you've got a bit of normality. And the other reason is that there's no wilderness in my mind that is the ultimate, and what I would like to do is be able to travel to different wildernesses, and then depending on the guests that I may be taking on safari or my own personal needs or requirements, I will go to a certain place to achieve a certain result or experience a certain kind of beauty, or experience photographic opportunities as opposed to walking opportunities, or remote wilderness with no other vehicles as opposed to more busy wilderness with great game viewing but less wild. So there's pros and cons to that, and I don't have a favorite. It all depends on what you want to do, Jack. So if you had have said, what's your favorite reserve in Africa for seeing kills, then I'd be like, well, probably the Masai Mara, because it is a great place to see predators hunting. But when you leave it open-ended like that, that question, I wouldn't be able to give you an exact answer. Tim on email, did anyone influence cause you to become a guide? And no, not that I remember. It could be the case that a certain thing happened when I was young and I don't remember, that got me captivated by animals and open spaces. But for me, I think it's a combination of various factors, mainly which is the fact that I got spoiled growing up and taken to various nature reserves and immersed in it from a young age, and those experiences from a young age, I think, certainly helped guide me to where I've become today, or where I've got to today and what I'm doing today. But a combination of having good friends, like-minded friends that love the bush, that I grew up with alongside and explored with, to my parents taking me to nature parks, the Kruger National Park on various holidays. So yeah, I think being born in Africa was a good step to me becoming a field guide. It's a good place to be exposed to it, and I feel privileged to have grown up here. I really do. If I'd have grown up in another country or moved to another country, which my family nearly did a few years ago, about 15, 16 years ago, we almost moved to another country, then I certainly wouldn't be here today, and I'm happy to be here, so I'm glad I'm not elsewhere. But yeah, sadly I don't remember any one reason, Tim. Susan, email, what is your opinion on zoos? My opinion on zoos is that they are necessary and they do provide a good service to the world and to animals, provided they are done properly. And that's, for me, the world over. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. As long as you're doing it properly and ethically, it's going to be a good thing, surely. Whereas, as we know, you do get bad zoos where animals are mistreated, standards of their enclosures are terrible, and they're the wrong reasons and motives behind it. And sadly, in this day and age, these are a lot of the stories we hear, and those are the ones that get publicized. And everyone may then think negatively about zoos, but I know for a fact that there are zoos and zookeepers and people involved in zoos around the world whose hearts are in conservation and nature and love what they do and do it with passion and do it for a reason. And there is reason behind zoos, and I fully understand that. But like I say, you get good zoos and bad zoos, just like you get good lawyers, good doctors, bad doctors, good cameramen, bad cameramen. So I think that's the way I look at it. You get good policemen, you get bad policemen. I mean, it doesn't matter what industry you look into. There's dodgy people out there, folks, and that's the sad reality behind it. And that can be in any industry or any walk of life, that you get people that are not doing the right things. An example of which I can give you, in South Africa, rhino poaching is a big problem, and I'm not going to open up that can of worms too much, but I am going to use it just to give you an example of how people that can be doing a great job, like being a vet. Now, if you think of a vet as a trade industry, you'd think, well, that's a good job. It's people looking after animals, animal doctors, wonderful, good people that must look after these animals. But what happened a few years back was that the syndicates of 4 of the most well-known wildlife vets in South Africa were caught involved in rhino poaching and smuggling. So it's like saying, yeah, are vets good people? Yes, they are, because they look after animals, but then you get bad ones too. So that kind of sums it up. But I have no problem with zoos. I sadly haven't spent much time in zoos in my life, for lack of reason to, because I have been spoilt in being able to see animals in their natural habitats. Obviously I could have gone to zoos to view tigers or other certain animals that you don't get in Africa and that I haven't seen in the wild, but I'm happy to wait for the wild. We've got an interesting event going on below us. I think the lady who's been tasked with looking after Twin Spots and Bruno is taking Bruno on some exercise, running around the perimeter of the garden, which is quite funny to see. I didn't expect to see her in her running gear with Bruno hot on her heels. She's a lovely lady, Zodwa. She does a great job looking after us here.
On that note, can we take 2 minutes? I need to change the battery in the camera.
Yes, we can, certainly.
Okay, so we're going to be out of broadcast for 2 minutes and then back for another.
That suits me. I wouldn't mind a little break. Okay, folks, we're going to shut down for a few minutes. We'll be back shortly. maybe go get yourself a cup of tea or coffee, or do an important email that you've been putting off, and we'll be back to you shortly. Okay, see you later. The changes that have happened in the last few minutes have been that I got a cup of coffee from Alex. Thank you very much, Alex, for the cup of coffee. Very thoughtful of you. So I got a cup of coffee and this flower, which I'm just going to position in some of these holes that have been bored by termites and other beetles, wood boring beetles, in this dead part of the marula tree. And it's a beautiful, beautiful flower. I personally haven't showed it to you before. Mark may well have. Mark is the man when it comes to flowers. But what you will notice is that they are exceptionally beautiful in color and design, and it's from a tree called the Pride of Dec, or Pride of the Cape, Kaap meaning Cape, the southernmost point or southernmost province in South Africa. And they obviously occur there and then all the way up to here, but that is where they were probably first seen, and hence their name. But a beautiful tree, the Pride of Dec, and one of the most prominent flowering plants we get naturally occurring here in the low veldt. So there's one growing just below the tree house, so I just picked that beautiful flower for you guys on the way up. So now let me just see what other questions have come through. Thank you so much again, folks. All of your questions and your understanding of our situation that we're in, being vehicle-less at the moment, we do appreciate, and it does allow us this opportunity to field questions on a broader spectrum when we are out on drive, and it is something to bear in mind when asking questions. It's ideal for us to be answering questions which are relative to what we are actually looking at through the camera. So the fact that now we are in a situation that allows for any questions to be asked in this broad field that we found ourselves in can be answered, whereas on drive we try and field the questions that are specific to what we are seeing or the situation we're in, as opposed to a random question like our history or how many times we've been bitten by snakes. Those kinds of questions can be asked now. Okay, Janice on Twitter: have you been to Victoria Falls? No, I haven't. There's lots of places where I haven't been in Africa yet, and Victoria Falls is one of them. It is on the list of things to do, as well as a lot of other places within Zimbabwe. It is a place I would love to go to, but sadly I have only been to Zimbabwe once, and that was at the beginning of 2008, actually, to the Pomashana Conservancy, in the Malelangwe Conservancy, rather, in central, southern, southeastern Zimbabwe. And the lodge that I used to work for here in the Sabi Sands has also got a lodge in this Malelangwe Conservancy in Zimbabwe. And the great thing about the Malelangwe Conservancy, or one of the great things, there's many beautiful things about that property, is that they've got high black rhino concentrations. Here in the Sabi Sands there aren't high numbers of black rhinos, so the reason why I went there in 2008 was during my training course, and we went there specifically to approach black rhino on foot and get experience with them and their encounters and the nature of their encounters. They are, out of the white rhino and the black rhino is notoriously more aggressive and short-tempered, and they are more likely to chase you up a tree than the white rhino. So we went across there to experience black rhinos on foot, and we did certainly experience black rhino on foot there, and it was a great learning curve and a great opportunity to be able to push the boundaries to a degree, and sometimes induce an animal to charge, which you would typically avoid at all cost with guests, but when training, it's necessary to push the boundaries in order to understand the feeling and understand the behavior of animals when they do charge, so that when it does happen with guests, you are ready for the situation. So we went there and did that and had a great time. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. Lots of baobab trees. Baobab trees are probably my favorite tree. Well, they are my favorite tree if I could choose one. And there's a lot of beautiful baobab trees there, conical rocky outcrops called koppies. And in some of those rocky outcrops there's even Bushman paintings, which are a great aspect of the game drive experience that you don't get in many places, where you can get off the vehicle and take a short walk to these rocky outcrops and look at the old cave paintings from many years ago, where you see some incredible rock arts of people hunting giraffe and eland and some large animals in those areas. So that is the only place I've been to in Zimbabwe, and it is a beautiful, beautiful place, but there are a lot more places, one of which is Mana Pools, M-A-N-A, Pools, which is a place that you can do a lot of good walking safaris in Zimbabwe, and great for photographic opportunities. There, unlike most places, the animals are fairly well habituated to people spending time on foot as opposed to in a vehicle, because that is typically how you get around there. And what that means is you can view prides of lion on foot, wild dog on foot, elephants on foot, everything, you name it. And the benefits of photographing animals being on foot is that you can get down to ground level and shoot at eye level with your subject, or if it's an elephant, you're shooting from below it, which is where you're going to be giving the most natural angle or best angle to convey the animal's size and shape and everything. So whereas on a vehicle you're a little bit elevated and restricted to getting low angles. So a great place photographically that I would love to go to. I think 2015 the Mana Pools trip will be ticked off my list of things to do. But many places in Africa I haven't been to yet, and I do plan on getting to at some stage. Okay, but thanks for that question. From Janice. And again, folks, I am diverging a lot from the questions you may be asking me, but the short answer to your question would have been no, I haven't been to Victoria Falls, and the long answer you got was about the time I have spent in other parts of that beautiful country. A voracious predator. Very rare specimen to find in these parts, but judging from where that tree squirrel's calling from, which is a little bit of a way off, I don't think it is twin spot. It could be Bruno in the other part of the garden, or who knows, a leopard. Leopards do spend a lot of time around this area that we're in now, around the Djuma camps. So we will just keep an eye out here. But it could be anything from a snake to a mongoose, bird of prey, leopard, lion. Who knows, even animals make mistakes just like we do. It could potentially be seeing something just like we do. We stop and we think we've seen a leopard or a lion, but it's just in fact a bush or a branch. And they also have false alarms from time to time. Okay. So back to Shonda's question regarding the differences between lions in different parts of Africa. Size will vary, coloration of mane will vary, the size of prides will vary, and the size of prides directly influences the hunting of those animals and what they specialize in. So a large pride of lion with lots of mouths to feed would become more specialized in hunting larger game, provided they were in an area with a lot of large game. An example I can give you with regards to that would be an area where I worked in the Kruger National Park on the Mozambican boundary, a beautiful area in the Lubombo mountain range. And in this area there was a pride of lion called the mountain pride, and they were 22 animals strong, and it was 22 adults. That's not including cubs or sub-adults. That's fully functioning, fully grown lions. Within that beg your pardon, pride of lions, there were 6 young males, all brothers, but of a very similar age. And it was just at the point before they were getting kicked out that the pride was at its biggest, 22. As soon as those 6 got kicked out by their fathers, the pride obviously dropped to 16. But it was 22 strong with 6 young, big males, a lot of brawn, but not so much brain, which is perfect when you're hunting giraffe. And that is what these lions specialized in. They specialized in hunting fully grown giraffe. And 2 reasons for that is that, yes, the pride was big, and secondly, the area that they're in allowed for giraffe hunting because there were a lot of giraffes there. So that just gives you an example of even how lions, quite close to where we are here, may act differently and have a different structure and lifestyle to other lions that could be nearby. But I think it's definite to say that there are small differences between lions in different areas. You get lions that live in desert areas that are highly specialized for that. So it is interesting how animals do differ slightly, the same species, within different areas. And the same goes for an animal like the spotted hyena, as a good example. In this area that we find ourselves in, the spotted hyena tend to move in very small clans, and they specialize. When they do steal, they steal from leopard in all likelihood. That's the most probable predator that a hyena in this area will steal from. When lions make kills here, we very, very seldom have hyena-lion interaction. It does happen occasionally, but very seldomly. And that's because the clans of hyena are small here, because they are in a situation where stealing from leopard, when they're not hunting for themselves, which they do, that was captured on Djuma Dec camera, I'm not sure when, it could have been a few years ago, but a hyena hunting an impala. They chased it into the Djuma waterhole and then managed to eventually catch it when it swam out the other side. But they do hunt wherever they are in Africa, but in some areas they may steal from lion, and to steal from lion they need to have bigger clans and a different mindset, and that only happens over years and years of them doing that. So you get that scenario, and then you get a third scenario, which is an interesting one, and one that needs to be mentioned and isn't mentioned enough. And that is that in certain areas, lion steal more from hyena than hyena from lion. And that's an important note, folks, because in nature, the stronger you are and the bigger you are, it allows you to take shortcuts. And lion, for example, even here, will steal from leopard, will steal from cheetah, will kill leopard, will kill cheetah, will steal from hyena when they can. Whereas in other areas, the tables may turn. So a lot depends on where you are in Africa. Shonda, thank you very much for that question. It's a good one. Casey, on email, what has been your favorite moment so far with Wild Earth? The first thing that comes to mind would be my first drive. It was a nerve-wracking experience, being up on camera for the first time, and the excitement of that, and the fact that it was my debut drive, and the fact that Mother Nature blessed us with 2 wildebeest giving birth on that morning. So Pete had gone out in the morning initially, and the plan was he was going to do half the morning drive and I was going to do the second half. And right here in Quarantine Clearings, he managed to find 2 wildebeest mothers in the process of giving birth. He watched one give birth and then kindly shot back to final control, swapped vehicles, and I managed to go and watch the second one give birth. And it was the first time I've ever seen an animal give birth in the wild, so let alone a wildebeest, any animal. So that was a momentous occasion in my wildlife career, for a few reasons: that it was the start of this new career with Wild Earth, which is a great one and I'm loving it so far, and also importantly that I got to see my first wildebeest giving birth. So thanks, Casey. That's probably my favorite moment so far, but there are a lot of good moments in between, a lot that we have managed to share with you, but a lot also that happens behind the scenes, getting to know the team. It's a wonderful bunch of guys here, and we're having a great time, and do have a great time on set and on camera with you, as well as behind the scenes. So There have been a lot of good moments so far. Thank you for the coffee, Alex. It was delicious. It is now done. I will be ready for another one in half an hour. Okay. Sandy on email, do you ever keep specimens like bones, horns or tusks that you find in the bush? And I have to a degree, but not as much as I would have liked to in retrospect. A hardcore stance on removing things from the bushes that we shouldn't, but I think removing the odd skull here or there is not going to create a major imbalance in the ecosystem. However, there are animals that are evolved to, like the horned borer moth, and their role on planet Earth is to break down keratin, those keratin sheaths on the horns. That's why they're here, and it's an important role, but if they miss out on one or two pairs of buffalo horns or kudu horns, it's not going to, like I say, create a major imbalance in the ecosystem. So the question is, I haven't collected enough of these little artifacts over my time in the years, my years in the bush, and it is something I've been thinking about recently, that I should start collecting a few more artifacts that we do find along the way. And when I do find a house of my own one day, hopefully soon, I don't have a home, I'm nomadic at the moment. Once I've got a base, then it'll obviously become easier, because my current nomadic lifestyle doesn't make for carrying around and collecting these kinds of artifacts. So hopefully I will be settling down relatively soon, and that will allow me to start collecting artifacts and storing them somewhere. Thanks, Sandy. Jason, can you check the audio, please?
That's the
Cicadas.
That's exactly it.
Okay, I'm not sure if that was from Alex or from one of the viewers, but the strange buzzing noise you can hear, very electrical type sound, are cicadas, and they are in this tree. The problem is that they are extremely well camouflaged. But if you don't mind bearing with me, I am gonna scan this tree and try and find you a cicada. They are, like I say, extremely well camouflaged. But that's not to say that we can't find one. So that is the funny noise you can hear. I'm just going to get comfortable here. You see, ideally I would be finding one fairly close to us, so that Jason can zoom in on it for you. They are about 1 inch long in general. The cicadas, or as Americans may pronounce them, cicadas. Bruno's getting excited in the background. Well, you see, we've opened up a can of worms here now, folks, because now that I've started this, I do not want to stop until we find one. So give me 1 more minute, Romeo, just time me there. Put a time limit on me. Ah, where are you guys hiding? It would just be so nice for us to be able to show you one of these things. But like I say, the camouflage is ridiculous. It's also kind of hard to pinpoint where that sound is coming from. Now this form of audio that we can hear is called stridulation, and essentially what the cicadas are doing are rubbing body parts together at a very, very high frequency in order to create this high. It's given me an extra minute airtime with which to look for them. So thanks, Tammy, for giving me another minute to look for the rare, elusive but loud cicada. I'm guessing they usually perch themselves on the bark of the tree as opposed to the leaves, and that cryptic coloration of theirs is very similar to that of the bark of these trees. You can hear our friend Zodo shouting at Bruno, telling him to keep it down. Zodo was the lady who took Bruno for a little run earlier around the garden to try and tire him out, which was quite amusing for myself and Romeo to witness from the treehouse. Come on, cicada. It's incredible that, considering how much noise is being made by them and how much we hear them, we very seldom actually get to see them. Shame, I think Bruno's feeling a bit left out because twin spots up here and he's down there, but if we let Bruno up here, the whole structure begins to shake and wobble, and we are concerned that he may plummet over the edge. He gets a bit excited, old Bruno. So we've made a educated decision to leave him downstairs where it is safer for him. A good way of spotting these cicadas is waiting for them to fly. They're winged insects that fly from place to place, but they don't fly very often. But if you do see one flying, obviously, hopefully you can get an idea where they land. And then zoom in on that. Birchall starlings flying over. That would have been the call you heard earlier, or just seconds before I pointed them out. Okay. Rhonda on email. Good morning, Rhonda. How are you doing? Rhonda's asking if I've ever seen a cheetah make a kill. And yes, I have been fortunate enough to witness that on 2 different occasions. The majority of my career has in the wildlife industry, the guiding industry, has been in the Sabi Sands, where we are now, and it's not the best place for cheetah viewing, but where I was in the southern Sabi Sands a few years back, there was an individual male cheetah that we used to see fairly regularly, and he did manage to make 2 kills that I was there to witness, both of which were impala. And all I can say is that you've heard about cheetah. We know it's the fastest mammal on earth. You try and prepare yourself mentally for how quick they are, but when you see them take off and you see them in action, it's absolutely mind-boggling how quickly they can move in a straight line, and then also how quickly they can change and re-accelerate chasing after their prey. So I have been fortunate enough to see 2 kills. The first time I ever actually saw a cheetah kill, my folks were up visiting me, which was great. So I got to share that experience with them. And my family's actually brought a lot of luck. One of the second cool encounters I had, major encounters I had, was watching lions hunting buffalo. And this was, when was this? 2009. And my sister had come to visit me also at the same lodge. And we got to see that really cool sighting. So it's on YouTube if you'd like to have a look at it. It's called Battle at Singita. So it's our little rip-off of Battle at Kruger, which you may have heard of. If you haven't heard of Battle at Kruger, have a look at Battle at Kruger on YouTube. It's an incredible clip of lions hunting buffalo, and I'll leave it at that. But it's a fairy tale story, so do watch it. And then the one that I managed to watch was we called Battle at Singita, Singita, and that was a really cool sighting. It's about an 8-minute video and quite interesting to see what happens in that video. So enjoy that. But yes, 2 cheetah kills since I've been in the industry, and both of which were really incredible. Thanks, Rhonda. Have you had any experiences with chimps or gorillas? From Jane on email. Hi there, Jane. Sadly, gorillas, not yet, but high up on the list of things to do. Every person that I've spoken to that has been on a gorilla trekking safari or gorilla viewing safari has come back saying it was a life-changing experience, not just a wonderful experience, a life-changing experience. So, and that's almost everyone that I've spoken to that has experienced gorillas. So it is something that I would love to do and do plan on doing as soon as possible. So that would be a good one. But with chimps, yes, I have been lucky. I have spent time in an area that is renowned for very good chimpanzee viewing, and that was on the banks of Lake Tanganyika, which is a lake in Tanzania. It's a very big lake, that's second deepest lake in the world, and it borders Burundi, the Congo, Uganda. It's a very big lake in the sense of where a few countries converge. And I was in Tanzania at an area called the Mahali Mountains National Park, and it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. It came to mind when, I can't remember who asked my favorite destination in Africa, but it is one of the most special places I've been to in Africa. It's remote, untouched, pristine, beautiful wilderness, and there I did get to view some chimpanzees. If you'd like to see some of my photographs, folks, from my time in the bush over the years, it would be useful following on Instagram at Scotty D Safari. There are some photos of my time in Tanganyika there, and some chimpanzees that I viewed, as well as others, exciting and cool things that I've seen along the way over the years. So that would be a useful place to see some of those photographs. And also on Scott Dyson Safaris on my Facebook page. I do spend time taking photographs when out and drive, and I do like to share those photographs with you. So on my Facebook page would be a good place for you to see those photos and follow my time in the bush, which I would like to share with you as much as possible. So yes, the chimpanzee viewing. Sadly, I was only in Mahali Mountains for about a month. I actually went in there when the camp was closed to refurbish the camp during the rainy season, just before it opened up again in the dry season. But in my month there, I did manage to see chimps a handful of times, and incredible animals to see. You find yourself looking at your hands and your anatomy, and then looking at them and thinking, whew, these guys aren't too far behind us. So a very interesting animal to see, as would the gorilla, to view. And yeah, a beautiful place, the Mahali Mountains. It brings back great memories. For me to get there, I spent 18 hours on a boat, a very simple boat with no toilets, no planned food or kitchens. You just take your bags and jump on the boat, and 18 hours later I got dropped off on a small beach where the Mahali Lodge is, or the lodge where I was working in Mahali Mountains, and it's an incredibly beautiful and remote place. As are a lot of the beautiful wilderness destinations and places we need to go to see these wild animals. They are wild, untouched places, so it is certainly a perk of the job, the places we get to go and see, and something that's going to keep me in this industry for years, because there are still so many places in Africa that I would like to explore, and this industry is one that allows you to explore beautiful wild places. So yeah, I've had a few brief encounters with chimps, Jane, but I would like to spend more time there. After I spent that month refurbishing that camp, I headed to another national park, Katavi National Park, also in Tanzania, where I managed a small tented camp over there. So I just actually got called up last minute to go and refurbish that camp, due to the current camp manager of that camp being very ill with malaria, which I got when I went there to take his place. So there was a bit of malaria in that area, and malaria, depending on the individual, can really wallop your system. In a few hours time, in a period of a few hours, you go from, well, I went from walking around being normal to basically incapable of carrying yourself, weak, cold, hot, useless. Yeah, you're basically incapable of looking after yourself, or I was. And I got it for the first time when I was there. Thankfully, I had been in transit back to Arusha, a major city in Tanzania, to do a little bit of training regarding all the camp admin side, as I was going to be managing camps for this company. So I needed to go and meet all the people in the offices. So I'd been in Mahali, left, and on my way back to Mahali to continue the refurbishments, I went down for the first time, but I was in a small town where they did have a hospital, albeit a hospital that you had to buy your own meals and waters. You'd ask the ladies who kind of come in the morning to clean your room, you'd give them money and send them on the street to buy your food and water. So it was a basic hospital, but they fixed me there. Well, only kind of fixed me. Then 2 weeks later it recurred, so they hadn't killed it properly, and then that time I got flown out. They've got a wonderful service in East Africa called Flying Doctors, and anybody who works in the bush or anybody who goes on safari there will be signed up with Flying Doctors, provided you're using a half-decent agent or booking agent, because it just really does make so much sense. For a relatively small fee, when you're out on safari, if something does happen, you've got guaranteed aerial support that will come in and collect you in a flying ambulance. And they sent a plane for me, a 4.5-hour flight in a Grand Caravan, to pick me up from Katavi National Park the second time I went down, and then 4.5 hours back straight to the Aga Khan Hospital in Nairobi, where they got me better for good. So yeah, that was my little bout of malaria, twice in 2 weeks, and since then I haven't got it, thankfully, because it is a nasty, nasty sickness to get. Okay. Dawn on Twitter is asking, why is it rare to see cheetah in this area? And the habitat determines the major reason, I think, for there being low cheetah numbers. And not only that, if we were to take all of the lion and leopard out of this reserve, despite the habitat being thick, cheetah would be able to survive and would do well. But because this thicker habitat and many other reasons, the prey that it attracts, and therefore the predators that the prey attracts, there's a high density of lion and leopard here. Now, lion and leopard will, and both can, kill cheetah with relative ease. So the cheetah are the weakest out of those three big cats, and lion and leopard will kill them. So because there's a high density of lion and leopard here, together with the bad habitats, cheetah don't do well here and or prefer to be elsewhere. So that is the major reason. It's too thick. Cheetah need open places to be able to excel and really use their incredible speed to the best of their ability. But it also allows them to spot lion from a distance or leopard from a distance that may be living in those open areas, open habitat areas, therefore not being killed by them. So there's contributing factors, but the major factor here is the habitat is too thick and the lion and leopard density is too high for cheetah to do well. So that's a good question, but that is the reason why cheetah are rare in this area. And then we've got Ryan, who sent through an email also regarding cheetah, asking the difference between king cheetah and regular cheetah. Now, king cheetah are simply a genetic throwback. They're no different to a regular cheetah, other than the fact that they've got a melanistic coat. Melanin is the dark pigment that you have in one's skin, creating black panthers or black jaguars, whereas leucistic is the white pigments you get in skin coloration, and leucism would be different to albinism, different to being an albino, but it'll be a paler shade of a certain animal. So you either get a dark morph or a pale morph, dark being melanistic, light being leucistic, and all a king cheetah is a melanistic cheetah. It's a genetic throwback that causes them to have more melanin pigments in their skin, therefore creating more black coloration in their coats. Okay, folks, there's just a few minutes left, so what I'm going to do is mix it up a little bit and get Jason up front here in the camera. And because I forgot to ask you guys to send Jason any questions, I'm going to ask him a few questions on your behalf, and it'll be nice for you to spend some time with him. He's just putting his shirt back on. There you go. So Jason, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back again. This is weird. Didn't expect this to happen twice. Super sensitive microphone, so sorry about the cicadas and the dogs. Bruno's been very, very jealous. Very jealous.
One of the microphones, which I'm going to show you guys, is dangling there in the tree. And you will ask yourself, what I'd like to think you're going to ask yourself, how on earth did it get up there? You can see the cable. Sorry, excuse my camera work, folks. It's not as good as Jason's, but we'll get there. So that that microphone hanging above him got there with his very good tree climbing skills. And as I said yesterday on Drive, it's probably the major reason why Jason got the job for his tree climbing skills. It's probably his strongest, most powerful trait that he carries at this stage of his career. But he was up this tree earlier. And Jason, what are your favorite trees to climb, being a professional tree climber?
Marulas. Marulas are awesome. This is a weird question. Marulas are very cool. All your big branchy trees. If you were a leopard, if you would choose that tree, I think I would choose that tree too.
Fair enough.
All your branchy trees, all of your ficus or ficus, because there's just so much to hold on to. You can go to the top. The branches are pretty strong. You can, I don't know, play around enough, and you can trust them instead of small things with thorns. Small things with thorns. No one likes small things with thorns.
And carrying on now with the tree climbing subject, is it not true that you were offered a job doing something quite interesting with birds of some sort, and you needed to be a good tree climber?
Well, when I was at school last year, a bunch of tree surgeons or arboriculturalists, is that a word?
It is today.
It's a word today. They came and they're doing a study with the Cape parrot, which is a close relative to the brown-headed parrot that you find here. And what they found is that all of the trees that they nest in and where their food comes from, all of those trees have been chopped down. And no, that's our national tree. It's a yellowwood. So they're trying to save it by finding a new tree to put them in. And what they did was they found that they're like pecans. pecan nuts and pecan trees. So they came and they came to my school and they said, who wants to come help us do this? Who wants to come check it out just over one weekend? Just a quick thing. And I was the only one who went, which upset me because I thought all my peers would be there and we'd all have a lot of fun. No one came. I was the only one who arrived. And in doing this, they saw potential, I suppose, and they
Potential in your tree climbing abilities, or anything else.
Just predominantly that. Other things as well, but predominantly that. And they invited me to England, where I went this year for 2 months just to do a couple of courses, which were the most fun I've ever had in trees. Because you got ropes, you can't fall out, you can't die, win-win. And then through that they said, well, we're coming back next year, in 2015, and we need someone to run this job for us. And it's only you have to be there once every 2 months, so you can do it during your studies. So every 2 to 3 months I'm going to be going to all of these separate locations, checking the nests, climbing the trees, making sure that the birds are there, that no bees have inhabited their made these little boxes. They're really cool, that replicate their nests. And yeah, that's the job I got just through playing in trees.
Well done, Jason.
That's pretty cool.
It is. Now, I think we only have a few minutes left, folks, so what we're going to do, we've got no comms with Final Control. What we're going to do is just keep quiet for these last few minutes and show you around the beautiful setting that we're in and the view beyond this canopy that we find ourselves in. So say goodbye to Jason. It's
goodbye,
the last time you see him for a while,
again.
and I'm going to say goodbye. I will see you guys a little bit later this afternoon. And excuse my camera work, just trying to find a nice view, and we will get there just beyond this beautiful, comfortable marula log. There we go. Folks, until this afternoon, when we will hopefully have some vehicles up and running, we are just going to leave you with this beautiful view. And from myself, Alex, Mark, Viam and Jason, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and just enjoy this tranquil view and all the birds calling for the last few minutes. And like I say, hopefully this afternoon we will be back on the vehicle and trying to find animals for you guys. Thanks very much. See you guys later.